Thank you, Rabbi. Really, thank you, because were it not for him, I wouldn't be up here telling stories.
Maybe you would.
Well, maybe, who knows, you know? If it weren't for me, maybe you wouldn't be. We're definitely in this together. So,
We're soulmates.
soulmates or cellmates, depending on how you pronounce it. We are serving a life sentence, and it's a good one. It's a good one. So, Daniel was saying that we enter through different gates. You know, one prayer might catch you, and another might catch someone else. And for me, I enter through stories. This is how I do my inner work for the High Holy Days. And this story wanted to be told again. It came to me through Reb Zalman several years ago. And I hadn't actually planned it. It wasn't like one that he told me directly. It kind of wormed its way through a student into one of my retreats. And I've told it a few times, but it seemed to want to be told again this year. Once, a disciple of Reb Elimelech of Lezhinsk came to him just before Yom Kippur, and he said, I am confused about the ritual of kapparot. Now, before I tell you any more, you may be confused about the ritual of kapparot. First of all, you may not know what it is, but you may have heard of it. It's very controversial, actually, now, because it's the ritual, it's an ancient ritual of taking a live chicken and using it as a substitute, as an atonement, a sacrifice. And it's still done in some Hasidic communities. And you take the chicken, you swing it over your head 3 times, and you say, this is my sin, this is my substitution, this is my atonement. And then the chicken is supposedly slaughtered humanely and then given to the poor to eat. Yes, thank you. It was the chicken. And that's why it's controversial, because there's no way to humanely swing a live chicken over your head. And some of the members of our congregation, I don't think Dossie and Grace are here tonight, actually adopt rescued chickens from New York, from the Hasidic community. What's that? Yeah. So, back to the story. So Rebbe Elimelech said, what is it you want to know about kapparot? And the disciple said, well, I want to know how you do it, because when I do it, it doesn't feel right. And he said, well, what do you do? He said, well, I take a chicken, I make sure it's a white chicken, and then I say the prayers from the book, and I swing it, and so on. I do everything I'm supposed to, but it doesn't feel right. How do you do it? And Rebbe Elimelech said, well, I basically do the same thing as you. I actually take a spotted chicken, not a white chicken, but I'm not the one to tell you. What you should do, you should go, and he directed him to the next town, to a certain tavern keeper, and he said, you watch how he does kapparot, then you won't be so confused. So, the chassid went, and he traveled to the next town, and he found the tavern, and he went into the tavern. There were a lot of people there eating and drinking, a lot of mostly non-Jews, even though it was Erev Yom Kippur, they were eating and drinking. And after a while, he went up to the innkeeper, and the innkeeper said, well, what can I do for you? And he said, I'm traveling, and I'm wondering if I could stay here. And the innkeeper said, no, not tonight. The inn is full. I'm sorry, I don't have any room for you. Go to the next tavern. And he said, well, I'm really tired and I can't go anywhere. Would you mind if I just sat in the corner on your floor there? And I won't make any noise. I'll sleep there. I just need some rest. So the innkeeper said, all right. And after a while, the people began to dissipate, and at midnight, the innkeeper shooed the lot of them, the rest of them out, and then he opened up all the windows, and he let a bunch of air in, and then he closed the windows again. And then he sat down at a table, and then he called to his wife. Yentabaila, bring me my notebook. What notebook? The one on the top shelf on the left. And she brought him the notebook. And then he opened the notebook and he started reading a list of his sins from the last year. Oy vey, Rabbona Shalom, I meant to do a regular prayer practice, but I missed morning prayers, and then I tried to cram the morning prayers into the afternoon prayers, and it didn't, well, you know how it worked out, not so good. Oy vey. And, well, I was mean. I yelled at my wife, Yenta Baila. She is such a good woman, but I was impatient, and then I got even grouchier, and I wasn't nice to the children. I love my children, but I don't have patience. I'm so sorry, Rabbona Shalom. And, well, I talked. I said bad things about my neighbor. I didn't mean to. I meant to be nice, but she's more successful in her tavern than I am, and I was jealous. And suddenly the words came out of my mouth, and then some more words, and yes, I said a lot of bad words. I shouldn't have done it, oy vey. And then, well, people, they pay me, and well, one time somebody paid me a little too much, and I knew it was too much, and I knew I should give it back, but I couldn't. I kept it, and well, that happened more than once, maybe twice. Oy vey, Rabbona Shalom, I promised that I would not do these things. I stood here last year and I promised I wouldn't be mean, I wouldn't steal, I wouldn't gossip. Look what it's come to. Here I am, Rabbona Shalom, look what it's come to. And he sobbed and he sobbed and he sobbed his heart out. And when he was done, he dried his tears, and he called out again, Yentabaila, bring me the other notebook. What other notebook? The one on the top shelf on the right. And Yentabaila, his wife, brought him the other notebook. And he opened this notebook up, and he read a different kind of list. Rabbona Shalom, this year you made a drought. The crops, half the crops we couldn't even harvest, and people went hungry. People were suffering, Rabbona Shalom. And you remember that night I went out in my wagon to collect firewood? And I was attacked. All of my money was stolen. I was beaten up. I could have died. That was so unfair. How could you let that happen? But the worst, Rabbona Shalom, the worst, my brother, who I love so much, you took my brother. He was so young, too young. How could you take him? Rabbona Shalom. And he sobbed, and he sobbed, and he sobbed, and then he said, I asked you last year, I prayed with all my heart for a year of peace and prosperity, and look where we are. What's it come to now? And he sobbed, and he sobbed, and he sobbed some more. And then he stopped, and he said, Yentabaila, bring me some string. And she brought him a ball of string. And he took those books, he put one on top of the other, and he said, God, I made some mistakes. You also made some mistakes. Let's call it even. We'll bury the hatchet. And he took that string and he bound up, he wrapped up those two books together into a bundle, and then there was a string hanging. And he took that string And he took those notebooks and he swung them over his head. And he said, "This is my sin. This is my substitution. And this is my atonement." And then he opened up the window and he flung those books out the window and he watched them land in the river and float away. And then he said, "Yenta Baila, let's have some schnapps." And she brought the schnapps, they poured the cups, and they drank. Good Yontiv, l'chaim. And now, the chassid, who you might remember was on the floor in the corner, was watching the whole time. He got up off the floor. He said goodbye, and he went back to the next town to Rebbe Elimelech. And Elimelech said, "So, new?" And he said, "I watched him. And what did you learn?" "I learned it doesn't have to be a white chicken. It doesn't have to be a spotted chicken. I don't need any chicken at all." Good Yontiv, l'chaim. And may we all be sealed for a good year.